The global financial landscape is undergoing a transformation that is far more significant than it appears on the surface. Behind closed doors, a quiet but powerful shift is unfolding, one that has the potential to redefine economic alliances and alter the balance of global influence. While much of the world remains distracted by political stories, new technologies, and rapid social changes, China has been carefully repositioning itself. Without creating noise or drawing unnecessary attention, Beijing has begun reducing its reliance on the US dollar and slowly distancing itself from America's financial structure. This is not speculation or rumor. It is a deliberate strategy supported by official data, market reports, and long-term policy decisions. For years, the United States has occupied a dominant position thanks to the strength of the dollar and the worldwide demand for U.S. Treasury bonds. These government-backed securities have historically been seen as one of the safest investments available, allowing Washington to borrow at low cost while maintaining global financial authority. China, as one of the world's largest economies, once held an enormous share of these bonds, tying its financial stability closely to the American system. This relationship created an interdependence that benefited both sides for decades. However, the global environment has changed. With rising geopolitical tensions, expanding trade conflicts, and the rapid evolution of technology and digital finance, China now sees the need to protect itself from external vulnerabilities. In recent years, Beijing has gradually reduced its U.S. Treasury holdings, shifting billions of dollars into other forms of reserves and assets. What once stood at over $1 trillion has now fallen to the lowest level seen in more than a decade. The decline has been slow, intentional, and consistent. China is not seeking a dramatic break or a sudden shock to the markets, but rather a controlled transition that strengthens its own financial independence. By stepping back from U.S. debt, China is minimizing its exposure to American policy changes, sanctions, and monetary decisions that could affect its economy without warning. This movement aligns with China's broader goal of reducing dependence on the dollar-dominated global system. Over time, China has expanded the use of the yuan in trade agreements, built its own cross-border payment networks, encouraged international partners to settle transactions in its currency, and invested heavily in assets that reinforce long-term stability. Gold reserves have risen, digital currency initiatives have strengthened, and economic partnerships with emerging markets have grown deeper. Each of these steps reflects a calculated shift toward a future in which China holds more control over its financial destiny. Meanwhile, these financial changes are taking place at the same time that China is rapidly advancing in areas like artificial intelligence and semiconductor technology. The timing is not accidental. As the global competition for technological leadership intensifies, Beijing understands that economic independence and technological capability must move forward together. By reducing its reliance on the U.S. financial system, China is creating a stronger foundation for the technological progress it aims to achieve. This is the environment in which today's developments must be understood. The changes may appear quiet or gradual, but their impact is deep and far-reaching. China is preparing for a world where it is less influenced by external powers and more capable of shaping its own path. Its actions reveal a long-term vision, one that prioritizes stability, sovereignty, and strategic advantage. What comes next will determine how nations trade, innovate, and collaborate for decades to come. In recent months, China's financial and technological decisions have shifted from quiet, internal measures to highly deliberate moves that carry clear strategic intentions. These choices reflect a long-term plan, one that aims to protect China's economic future while simultaneously positioning it as a dominant force in global markets. The reduction in U.S. Treasury holdings is not simply a financial adjustment. It is part of a broader effort to reduce exposure to foreign pressure points. By moving away from U.S. debt, China is building an economic shield that ensures greater control over its monetary direction and limits the ability of outside forces to influence its stability. At the same time, China has concentrated heavily on enhancing domestic innovation, particularly in sectors where foreign dependence once created vulnerability. This dual focus shows that China wants to eliminate weaknesses on both financial and technological fronts, giving itself the flexibility to navigate future global shifts with confidence. Parallel to these economic maneuvers, China's progress in semiconductor development highlights a turning point that industry analysts have been quietly anticipating. What once seemed like an uphill battle for China has now turned into measurable advancement, especially as more companies demonstrate the capability to design and manufacture chips without requiring U.S. approvals. The determination behind these technological gains suggests that China views self-reliance not as an optional goal, but as a necessary foundation for its long-term competitiveness. Each step forward in domestic chip production reduces the impact of foreign restrictions and increases China's ability to shape future technology standards according to its own priorities. This acceleration also creates a ripple effect across global supply chains, which must now adapt to a world where China is no longer a passive participant, but an active driver of innovation. These financial adjustments and technological milestones work together in a way that reveals a deeper strategy. China is carefully balancing internal strengthening with external positioning, ensuring that every move enhances its leverage in global affairs. Cutting back on U.S. Treasuries limits vulnerability, while advancing chip capabilities expands influence. Both actions demonstrate that China is preparing for a world where resilience and independence are the most valuable forms of power. And as each initiative gains traction, it becomes clear that China is methodically building a framework designed to support its ambitions far beyond the immediate moment. The latest developments inside China's semiconductor sector have forced many international companies to reassess their expectations and assumptions. For years, the dominant belief was that China would struggle to compete without access to American technology, especially in areas like advanced chip design and manufacturing. But recent progress has demonstrated that China's response to restrictions has not been passive. Instead, it has pushed domestic firms to accelerate research, expand local production lines, and refine techniques that previously depended on foreign systems. This shift did not happen overnight. It grew out of sustained investment, strategic prioritization, and the recognition that technological independence is no longer just beneficial, but essential for long-term stability. As these firms continue improving their capabilities, the industry landscape is beginning to reflect a new reality in which China's technological direction is shaped primarily by internal momentum rather than external partnerships. One of the most revealing indicators of this transition is the reaction from major U.S. chipmakers, many of whom once enjoyed a dominant presence in the Chinese market. These companies have increasingly acknowledged challenges in maintaining their foothold, not because demand has decreased, but because China's homegrown alternatives have grown stronger. Reports from within the sector highlight an environment where domestic suppliers are steadily replacing imported technologies, narrowing gaps in performance and reliability. For multinational corporations that once depended heavily on Chinese buyers, this shift introduces complications. Their tools, designs, and intellectual property have been central to global technological progress for decades. But the rise of capable local competitors means the balance is changing. As a result, several U.S. firms have quietly admitted that maintaining previous levels of influence in China is becoming more difficult with each passing year. This evolving dynamic has created new pressure on international companies to redefine their long-term approach. The combination of regulatory restrictions, shifting supply chains, and China's accelerating internal development has reshaped the competitive environment. For U.S. chip giants, the question is no longer how to dominate the Chinese market. It is how to adapt to a world where their role may be smaller than before. Their public statements reflect a mixture of realism and concern, acknowledging that China's rapid advancements could affect their global operations as well. And while these companies continue to push forward, the undeniable rise of China's domestic capabilities forces them to reconsider strategies that once seemed secure. The industry now stands at a point where past advantages are no longer guaranteed, and the future will depend on how effectively each side navigates this shifting technological landscape. China's economic recalibration has coincided with its strengthening position in global technology, and together, these shifts are altering long-standing assumptions about international power dynamics. The reduction in exposure to U.S. financial instruments shows that China is no longer willing to remain tied to external frameworks that could limit its strategic choices. This financial distancing reinforces its broader objective of maintaining flexibility in times of geopolitical tension, allowing China to respond to global developments on its own terms. While the move away from U.S. Treasuries is often discussed in economic circles, its implications extend far beyond balance sheets. It reflects a mindset focused on preserving autonomy and minimizing vulnerabilities, especially as competition between major powers intensifies. This realignment signals a future where China seeks to influence global markets not from a position of dependence, but from a foundation that it has engineered to serve its long-term interests. At the same time, the progress made by Chinese chipmakers has created another layer of transformation, one with consequences that reach across entire industries. Technology firms around the world are paying close attention as China demonstrates increasing capability in areas once thought difficult to achieve without foreign equipment. These advancements have strengthened China's confidence, fueling an ambition to not only catch up with established players, but to chart its own course in the technological arena. The reduction in reliance on imported components and the expansion of domestic research networks show how rapidly China's internal ecosystem is evolving. This momentum has reshaped global expectations, as every improvement brings China closer to achieving a level of self-sufficiency that would have been considered improbable just a few years earlier. Within this shifting landscape, international stakeholders are beginning to realize that China's financial and technological strategies are interconnected components of a much broader vision. By securing economic independence and advancing domestic innovation simultaneously, China is creating a structure that supports its rise on multiple fronts. Each decision, whether in finance or technology, reinforces the next, producing a compounding effect that strengthens its overall position. This integrated approach illustrates that China is not reacting impulsively. It is executing a long-term plan designed to give it greater resilience in a rapidly changing world. And as this plan continues to unfold, it becomes evident that the influence China gains through these developments will shape how global systems function and how nations respond to emerging challenges. The shifts taking place in China's financial planning and technological development reflect a country preparing for a new phase in global competition. Reducing reliance on U.S. Treasuries is not an isolated adjustment, but part of a systematic approach aimed at securing economic flexibility. By limiting exposure to external financial pressures, China is ensuring that its future economic decisions remain under its own control. This kind of strategic insulation becomes especially important when global conditions are unpredictable, and it underscores how seriously China views the need to protect its economic trajectory. Each adjustment to its financial holdings creates a stronger foundation from which China can navigate changing geopolitical conditions without facing immediate constraints from foreign policy or market disruptions. Simultaneously, China's push toward technological independence has added significant momentum to its long-term strategic goals. Progress within the semiconductor sector represents a major turning point, particularly as local companies demonstrate increasing capability to design and produce chips within the country. These developments have challenged previous assumptions about China's dependency on foreign technology and have shown that the limitations once imposed on it have become incentives for deeper domestic innovation. As these capabilities grow, so does China's confidence in shaping its own technological future. Every improvement in domestic chip production illustrates a commitment to overcoming the barriers that once restricted its progress. This advancement does not signal the end of global competition, but it does indicate that China is now competing from a position of greater strength. Together, these financial and technological steps outline a clear direction in which China intends to move. The combination of reducing foreign financial reliance and building robust domestic innovation places China in a position where it can influence global developments with more authority. These efforts show a coordinated attempt to reinforce internal stability while expanding external reach. China's actions demonstrate that it is not only adapting to global pressures, but also using them to strengthen its overall standing. The evolving conditions inside China point toward a future shaped by decisions that prioritize independence, resilience, and long-term capability. And as each step contributes to this broader progression, the effects are felt far beyond China's borders, influencing how nations and industries prepare for the next phase of global competition.